Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to this session where we'll try to become a PowerApps Ninja in roughly an hour by creating a dynamic data-driven Power App from scratch. Now, at this point I would assume that you have at least heard of what Power Apps are. If not, then I would like to recommend that you go check out quick introduction videos around it. Now, you can also take this session at your own pace. However, I would highly recommend you follow along and build your own app while watching. Having said that, let's take a look at a couple of things that you will need to proceed. So the first one is Office 365 subscription. I'm not going to talk about a lot of details around it, but just so you know, you need it. And the second thing is under Office 365 subscription, you need to have a Power Apps license allocated to your user. And the third thing is you need to have an idea around which the Power App needs to be built. And finally, an hour at this point, as far as this session is concerned. Alright, let's get into the system. Okay, so here we are in the system and I already have a few things opened up. The app that you see on the screen, it's called the RL Tracker. And this is the app that we are essentially going to replicate as part of this session. Now, what does this app do? So there's this game called Rocket League, which I love playing. And since it's a compact game or a competitive game, there are a lot of stats around each of the players, like how many goals he has scored, how many assists this guy has, and there's a lot of stats around it. So there's a third-party site which exposes an API, and via this API you can go ahead and gather all the stats of all different players. And this is the exact API that we are going to use as part of building this particular application. So let me just showcase you how this app works. So I am one of the players, so let's try looking me up. I come here, I just type it's Candy, and it's Candy is my gamer name. So now, as you can see, the moment I typed it here, the request went on to Rocket League stats, and then my statistics came in. So I have an accuracy of 54.8%, which is, I find it pretty good actually, or decent. Now I have 1281 wins, I have 3362 goals, and all of the other stuff. Let's see, there's one more, my teammate actually, Mahir. Let's take a look at his stats. So he has accuracy of 56% and all the other statistics. So this all lookup is actually happening in real time, and you're getting the data from Rocket League servers to this app, and that's what we'll be building. Now there are a couple of other things as well that I've implemented as part of this app, and those are essentially if you want to track this guy forever in this app, then you just click here and you just press the track player button, and notice how this player gets into the left sidebar, and you can click here, and this is essentially going to take you to a different page wherein the detailed level of statistics for this player are going to showcase. Now let's say I put my name as well, track player, and the list kind of goes on. So if I want to see the statistics of Mahir, I just click here. If I want to see my statistics, I come in here and click here. So this is the functionality which we are going to replicate. With this, I think you pretty much cover at least 60 to 70% of what Power Apps has to offer. We'll be touching upon literally most of the features that Power Apps has. Alright, let's get started. So I go to web.powerapps.com to get into the PowerApps studio, and let's switch to apps here, and let's create a new app. So it's going to showcase a lot of predefined things, like if you want to choose common data service and Dynamics 365 SharePoint, a lot of other stuff. Don't worry about it. We are just going to go ahead with a blank app here and with a tablet layout. Okay, so once we select the blank app, this is the studio that we come in, and let's try and get to know this screen a little bit better. So just like any conventional app, over the top you have all the different menus for all the different things that you can do, like you can have different screens, you can have a predefined themes so that you don't mess up with all the colors and stuff. And then you have some usual stuff like bold, italics, underline, and a couple of fill options, arranging, aligning, and grouping options. So most of the things here are pretty self-explanatory. I'm not going to touch upon all of them. And on the top you have the menu wherein the file takes you to, obviously, if you want to choose any app settings, like let's name our app as tracker, and let me choose the color as this one, the icon as the start one. I don't have any description at this point. I can go ahead and change the screen size plus the orientation. Currently the settings looks absolutely fine to me. I don't need to change anything. Now there are a couple of experimental features as well. Let's not worry too much about them at this point. And then finally on the left hand side you have all the other options, like you can save as, share, and we'll see about collections, media, variables, etc. a little later. Let's save this for now, and let's go back, come back to this screen again. And now on the left hand side wherein it shows you screen, so this part kind of is known as a canvas. So the blank page that you see, this is a canvas, a blank canvas for you to build upon. And this canvas is known as a screen, and all of the screen that you have in the system are going to be displayed here. So if I want to go ahead and create a new screen, I'll come here and create a blank screen. So there you have it, a screen 2 and screen 1 comes along. Okay, let's delete the screen 2 for now. And under home you have all of these things that we already talked about. Then under insert you have option for quickly inserting labels, buttons, text boxes, HTML text, and controls are like drop downs, combo boxes, date picker. There's a huge list. You can do a lot of things here. And finally we have gallery as well, and this is the one which we are essentially going to use, and its main purpose is to display data from any external system. And data table is like self-explanatory. If you have any connections to SQL, just create a data table in the app and populate it with your SQL data. You can also build forms here. You can have a edit form, display form, just in case if you want to fill a form, maybe a registration form for your app, you can build it via this. You can also go ahead, insert media like image. You can have camera control here. You can have a barcode reader, video, audio, and a lot of other stuff. And you can also build charts, as you can see here. And finally, there are some predefined set of icons that you can use as part of the app. Now, on the right hand side screen, again, the typical or conventional scenario wherein all the properties related to the item that you have selected on the left hand side gets displayed. So let's say if I have a screen 1 selected here, all the properties of screen 1 gets displayed. And you can take a look at whose properties these are by looking at this screen, or just the name on top of it. So let's say if I create let's say I paste an image here. So notice how the properties change to the image ones. And let's talk about the properties a little bit here. All the properties here pretty much at least right now focus on this area, which is like common across all the controls that you're going to add. And this is the one, this is the area which defines the placement of each of your component in the canvas. So position, pretty much this is the x-axis and this is the y-axis. So where do you want to place this image on? Currently it's set to 40, and 40 as x, 40 as y. Let's change it to 100 as x. So notice how this shifts to right hand side. Similarly, size, pretty obvious. Width and height of the component, what do you want to do? Padding, again, pretty obvious stuff. Then you have all the other properties like color, border radius, what happens if somebody hovers over the image, and a whole lot of other stuff. Let's not worry too much about it. Let's delete this for now, and I think we are fairly comfortable at this point with the screen here. Let's start building. Okay, so what we have to build here is first of all this header section here. This is one rectangle. Then we have the sidebar, that's another rectangle, and then we have the main content or the main container, which is the third rectangle. Let's start off by creating rectangles on our canvas. I'll get into icons, scroll down and choose rectangle. Now notice the X and Y properties here, they are defaulted to 40 40. Let's change it, shift this to top left corner of the canvas, and for the widths and heights and even for X and Y positions, it's always advisable that you pick dynamic values, as in they should be, all these widths and heights, they should be relative to something. Okay, so let's rename the screen as of now as main screen and rectangle 2 as header background. Now for the header background, the X and Y seems to be okay. I want this header background to stretch towards the width of the entire main screen. Now since I don't know the width of main screen, I cannot just write any figure here. Instead what I'll do is I'll either click the width icon or the width button underneath it, or I come here and choose width, and now I can write a formula here. Now as part of the formula, what I'm going to tell is choose the main screen's entire width for this rectangle, and notice how the rectangle expands. And what I told you was this rectangle now is relative to the main screen. So the moment I change the width of the main screen, automatically the header background's width is going to get modified. So you should never get stuck with all the static values here. Instead, just try and make them as you know, dynamic as much as you can. Now width was pretty easy. Now I don't want the rectangle to take up the entire height of the app here, so I need to fill in some value here, and again that has to be relative. So what we are going to do is, considering the main screen's height is 100%, let's put this header background, let's make the header background take only 20% of the entire screen. How we are going to do that? I just come in here, click the height button and write a formula wherein I'm going to say take up 20 multiplied by main screen dot height divided by 100. So now it's going to take up 20% of the screen. Now if you feel that okay, this is too much, let's say 15. 15 looks about right. And the color, I hate it. Let's go ahead and change it. I'll come here, switch to the fill property of the rectangle, and it is currently set to some RGBA value. I don't want to do that. Instead I want to pick up my own color. Now PowerApps has default set of functions or methods already provided, which you can actually leverage while building up the app, and you can take a look at them by clicking the FX button here and switching to you know, all the other options like categories like text, logical, table. Currently we are looking for color, so let me switch to color, and these are the methods that are available. And if you click the method name, it's gonna tell you what it basically does. So what I have is I want to populate this with one of my predefined colors. So I'm going to choose color value of one of the colors that I have, and that's this one. Okay, and now I'm going to close this bracket, and notice how the color changes for this rectangle. Alright, now there is another thing, there is one thing called as display mode, which is currently set to edit, and there are three states to each of the component here. They are essentially disabled, they are either in the edit mode or in the view mode. Now this rectangle, since we don't need any disabled or edit functionalities around it, we just put it to view mode. Okay, and we don't need to worry too much about disabled color because this box is never going to be disabled. Hover color is again, I don't want to implement any of the hover functionalities, but it looks like there is a formula already written around it. So if I press this, it's gonna change it to hover fill, and it is essentially telling me that pick up the header background's fill color itself as the hover color. So in nutshell, you won't see any change even if you hover over this. Okay. uh, Rest of the other values are absolutely fine, so my top bar is absolutely okay. Now let's go ahead and create a sidebar. Again, let's come in here, create a rectangle, and this time the X position can still be 0, or now since we have to make it relative, I would want to say that the X position is pick up header backgrounds X position. So it's going to take 0. Now, as far as the Y position is concerned, I want to keep this rectangle just below the header background. So what I'm going to say is pick up header backgrounds height, and this is automatically going to take it just below the header background. Let's name it as sidebar. It's also one of the best practices to actually name all of your components here. Most of the people usually forget this. And again, the same formula applies for the width of this. We don't want to necessarily this box shouldn't take up all of the width of the screen here. Instead, there has to be a percentage. So let's divide this into 30/70. So 30% is sidebar, 70% is the main content. I'll get into width, and I would say 30 into main screen dot width divided by 100. Okay, this looks pretty big to me, so let me switch it to 20%, and that looks about right. Or maybe we can try 25. That's also fine. So the remaining amount we know at this point left is 75. So again, the height has to be, let's switch the height as main screen dot height. Notice how it's going in. I mean, it's actually overflowing out of the window or out of the screen. Let's say from this main screen's height minus the header background's height, and it's gonna perfectly fit into the screen. I hope you are following along. Again, I am going to change the color to pick up the one that I've given in the header background. So I'm going to say header background dot fill, and now the color matches absolutely. So at this point, let's try and preview our app so far. I'll go here, hit the preview app button, and this all looks fine to me. Now notice one thing: the moment I click this rectangles, there is a blue line that's coming on sidebar and the header. I don't want that blue line. What's that? So there's something that's called as there's a property on each of the component, focused border thickness. So the moment some component becomes focused, then what needs to be the border? Currently it's set to 2. I'll switch it to 0, and I'll repeat the same for this sidebar as well, and let's now preview it. Now even if you click on any of these things, nothing happens. So this is what we want. So far so good. Okay, now let's change the color of the main screen's background here as well. So I'll select main screen, get into the fill property, and choose the color value of this. And yeah, so one thing, the app might not look too pretty with all the colors and stuff, but just bear with me for the moment. So the next thing is, let's create our main container. I'll again get into icons, create a rectangle, and I'll quickly say the X position is going to be sidebars X, or actually sidebars width plus let's give it a padding of 10 points. And for the Y position, I'm going to say header background's height plus a padding of 10 points. So now it's taking 10 points from the left and from the top, and it perfectly fits uh, the way we want it to fit. Now coming back to the width, I'm going to say take up the width of the main screen minus sidebars width minus 10 for the padding that we give on the left hand side, and another 10 for the padding that we are going to give on the right hand side, so minus 20. And for the height, again the same logic, main screen's height minus header background's height minus 20 padding, both from top and bottom. So now notice how this all looks absolutely fine. And the color, let's choose the color as white, and this time instead of putting in any value, I'm just gonna say white, and that white is actually a predefined color, so it's gonna take that. And for the rectangle, let's again go ahead and change the focus border thickness to 0. Switch the display mode to view and rename it as main container. Now let's put our app name here, and for that I'm going to put in a label. Here's the label. The X position is going to be main header background dot X plus 20 padding. And so for the height, what we want is this text needs to be absolutely in the dead center of the height of the header background. So what I'm going to do for the height is I'm going to say that the Y position of this should be header background dot height divided by 2 minus label 1 dot height divided by 2. So with this formula, this gets into the dead center of the header background. Okay, now let's name this as a title, or maybe app title, and the text has to be RL tracker. Now for the text or for the label here, again there are a lot of other properties which I'm not going to touch upon too much, although display mode needs to be set to view. Let's go ahead, change the font from Open Sans to, let's say, Lato black, and font weight would be bold. Okay, now the color of this should be white. Let's say white, and let's change the size from 13 to 15, or maybe let's put up 17. 20 should also do, actually. Yeah, that looks much better. So yeah, we have the app title here. Awesome. The next thing that we need to put in is the search bar or the search text here, text box. Let's do that, and this time we are going to select text input, and again the height, or actually let's first put the X and Y positions. So the X position should be, since this gets into the sidebar, I'm going to pick sidebar's X position plus 20 of padding. And for the Y position, I'm going to say sidebar's Y position plus 20. Okay, awesome. And notice via this, now the text box width is like too much. Let's reduce it a little. Again, instead of static value, let's get the dynamic value. And I'm going to say that the width is going to be sidebars width minus 40. Now 40 is like 20 padding on the left, 20 padding on the right. So sidebar dot width minus 40. So that's gonna get this into dead center again. So this is all good. Now notice there are rounded corners to this text box. I don't need that. So you can change the property of border radius. Currently it's set to 5. If I change it to 0, notice they are now square uh, corners. Again, there are some ugly looking borders around here. Let's go ahead and change them. Now I'll come here and first of all choose the color as white. The background needs to be transparent. Awesome. The border should be 0 pixels. I don't need any borders. So this so far looks pretty good, but then there has to be an indication that this is actually a text box. So let me change the color of the fill. So instead of putting it to transparency, let's give a custom value of this, and this looks good. Awesome. Let's look at the other properties. For this text box, since we cannot keep it on view mode because people are going to type in this, it has to be put on the edit mode. And the disabled color for this is disabled fill. I don't think we'll need it. Although hover color, notice it changes to something which I don't like. Let's change it to the text input fill itself. Text input 1 dot fill, and now even if you hover over it, nothing changes, although the text actually turns black. So let's go ahead and change that as well. Now instead of hover fill, this time I'm going to go to hover color, and I'm going to say that text input 1 dot color property. So now if I hover over it, nothing changes, and that's what we wanted. Awesome. One final thing, let's also change the font and the size. The size needs to be 11 points, and the font should be COUI. That's what I like. So, and finally let's preview this. I click on play. This looks good. Hovering also looks good. Focused border needs to be changed for this. I can enter any value and that absolutely works. So let's quickly change those settings here. Focused border, focused border. Instead of removing the border, instead let's change the color of the focused border to white. This would look actually good. Let's preview this. Let's focus it, and yeah, indeed, the white looks better. Alright, so now comes the main part. What happens when I search this and I want to get that data from the Rocket League stats website? So this is where the true potential of PowerApps kick in. Now this PowerApp can essentially talk to multiple different systems and bring in data from all of them and display it here. So we'll get into that by going into file and connections, and this is the place wherein all of the connections with your app are getting displayed. So notice, if you see, I already have 3 connections built. One of them gets me to Excel online, and one of the connection is to OneDrive for Business, and finally there is a connection to Rocket League stats as well. Now let me focus on this particular connector here. This is something that I have created. This is a custom connector. So let's first look at new connection window here. Let me give you a brief overview of what all is available out of the box. So you have options to connect to all of these services. Just see how big the scroll bar is. And there are too many services, and they are not essentially Microsoft products. They are connecting to all of the different products like Slack and what else? Trello, Todoist, Twitter. So the list is huge. And from this list, since obviously Rocket League stats is not displayed because nobody cares about it, to be very honest, it's something that we are building for ourselves. So there has to be a custom connector built. Now, I'm not going to get into the details of how we can build a custom connector, but what I've essentially done is, let me just give you a crux of it. I expand the data part of it, get into the custom connectors, and this is the place wherein all of the custom connectors are built. Now let me get into the edit mode of this connector and tell you what all things are there. So these are the four simple steps for any of the custom connector. In the general, obviously it tells you what the custom connector would do, and the authentication type, again I'm gonna skip it. The definition part of it. Okay, so this is where all of the methods uh, which are actually defined. So I have a method defined as get platforms, and this is going to fire up all of the platforms for me. And this is the actual API, the URL API call that's gonna happen. So if I get into the Rocket League stats, look at the documentation here, and see this platforms call. So what I've done is I've taken this platforms call here and created a custom connector, built a method here, and put in the custom connector here. So now the PowerApps essentially picks up all of the stuff, whatever the request we are giving, whatever the response we are getting, it just does it automatically and flawlessly. Okay, so I just created this connector. Let's just go ahead and use this connector as is. So let's first see what method will get invoked when we search something here. So what we are trying to find out is players, and search players. So this is a query that we'll fire up. So what we are telling is search for all the players, and these are the parameters that I need to pass. Fair enough. What I'm telling is, in the display name parameter, I'm going to pass in whatever user enters into the text box that we just created. Let's get started with this connector. Let me go back here, and this time, instead of rectangles, labels, or text boxes, we are essentially going to use a gallery. Now gallery is a control which basically allows us to modify how the list gets displayed whenever there is an external data coming in. So I think this is the best fit for us. I'll choose this layout, and notice this gallery comes in. Let me first get into the positioning. Let's position it better. For the X one, I'm going to say that pick the X position of main container. Add, don't need to add anything actually. That's absolutely fine. For the width, let's pick the main container's entire width. So awesome. And the Y position should be main container's Y position, and the height should be main container's height. Okay, so we are done with the positioning, and this is how the list gets displayed. Now currently it's showing all dummy data. We need to connect it to something. This gallery control here, If you want to pick the data, uh, let's just switch to the items property of this gallery. So this items property is where we define a collection, or we actually call any external system from where the data is going to come here. Okay, currently, since this is set to a blue color, it's actually a collection. Okay, and the collections are like what we saw here. Okay, so once we run this app, this is going to create a new collection, and that collection is going to get displayed here. We don't need collections since we already have um, our API registered. What we are going to tell is, since we have the connector associated to the app, we'll say, oops, I think we forgot to connect it. So what we are going to do is come into the data part here, and in the data source, we'll add a data source. And this time, let's select Rocket League stats, and that is now added. Now, if you go here to the items property, if you say Rocket League stats, notice all of the methods that we had registered under custom connector gets displayed. Now, the one that we are interested in is search player. Now, it's asking for a display name parameter. Now, this display name is essentially text input 1 dot text, and the second parameter is optional. I'm just gonna skip it, and we'll pick the data part of it. Don't worry about this syntax because this is completely part of the custom connector that we have built. So every connector would actually have a different set of syntax here, and you'll have to get to the documentation of that connector to understand how it needs to be used. So ultimately, once this gets fired, it's going to give a JSON list of the entire data that we actually want. So let's get into the mapping here. Now, there is an icon in the gallery item or the gallery here, which says edit, and once you press this, it's going to take you to the edit part of one single line item in the entire gallery. Now let's see what all things would be populated inside this item here. Let's go back here. There is a player image, there is the player display name, and then there are a couple of other stats which are available. Let's put them into this gallery here. Okay, so let's first put up the image here. Now, whenever we are editing a gallery here, notice there are a lot of other controls available, right? And one of them is image 2. Okay, so inside of a gallery, whenever you are editing a single item, there is a property called as this item. Now, this item essentially means whatever the item is available as part of that particular list. So this item dot all the properties which are available from the API or the external application gets displayed. So this is essentially a player object, and avatar is a property of that player object that gets reverted, or that gets populated from the Rocket League stats website. So I know for sure that avatar is actually an image here, the property. So I'm going to pick the avatar here, and the image is going to change accordingly. Let's say the title text is this item dot display name, and the subtitle is let's say, what all things do we have? Unique ID. That's okay for now. All right. Now I think as of now, everything looks to be set for us. So what we have done is we have put in the gallery, all of the mappings have been done from the data that is going to be received from the Rocket League stats website. Let's see it in action. I think this should fairly work right now. So let me go ahead and try searching me. It's Candy. And there you have it. The request has gone from here to Rocket League stats, and I've got back all the properties or all the objects. And from that object, I'm picking up the avatar property, which is essentially an image, the display name property, the unique ID property, and whatnot. Let's search for my teammate as well, just so you know that it is actually working. Mahir T, and there you have it. Another one. Let's do it. Let's try it, and let's see multiple contacts or multiple items here. It's so this is the entire list. Now everything that has its in it, all the players that have its in it, they are just gonna get displayed here. Isn't it amazing? See how fast we have gone and created this complex looking application so easily. Okay, so this looks good. Let's go ahead and create the track player button, and the list that gets displayed here. Let's build upon it. All right, so this is one of the galleries, and what we're going to do is let's rename this gallery as players gallery. Okay, and on the main screen we are going to put another gallery, and this is essentially going to be a blank, or maybe let's say another vertical gallery, and let's position it properly. We're going to say sidebar dot x for the x property. Y property is going to be sidebar dot y plus text input 1 dot height plus 20 and 2040 padding. Okay, the width is going to be sidebars width. Awesome. And let's get into the edit mode of this gallery, and it looks like this is way too huge for me. I mean, the height of each of the list item here. Let's reduce it. Now for the gallery item, the way you reduce all of this is via the template size property. So currently it's set to minimum of there's some formula, minimum of 160 or something. Let's put it as 60. That's the max I want to go. Okay, now every component under it has gone haywire. Let's fix that as well. We'll switch the image from width and height. Let's give it, since the total height of each item is 60, I'll give it as 40 and 40. So that's a small image here, which is absolutely fine. The title too. Again, the width is like currently set to parent dot template width. Now this template width here is actually the width of a single item in that gallery. Okay, so it's telling the parent dot template width minus a lot of other stuff. I'm not going to worry too much about it. The width seems to be okay for this item. The exposition seems okay. Let's reduce the size of it from 20 to, I want to bring it to 13 or maybe 11. The Y position is currently set to 44, and that's a static. I'm going to say parent dot template height. No, actually let's mark it as 0 itself, or instead of that let's give it a padding of 20 or maybe 10. This looks better. I don't need subtitle 2. I don't need any of the arrows here. I do need separators. That's okay. This gallery isn't actually looking too pretty. let's make it pretty. So the first thing that I'm going to change is currently the Y property, we have given it as a static 10 here because we thought that it looks good. um, let's bring it in the dead center of this. So again, what I'm going to do is for the Y property, I'm going to say template height, sorry, the gallery 2 dot template height divided by 2 minus title 2 dot height divided by 2. So that brings it in the dead center. Awesome. um, this looks good. Now let's populate this as well, and this is essentially where we are going to use all of the collections. And instead of the track button that you see on the right hand side gallery here, what we are going to do is, and you notice these arrow marks here on the right hand side. So the moment somebody clicks these arrows, that's where this particular item needs to get into a collection, and then it needs to get displayed here on this list. So let's get into this gallery and let's click this item here, and notice there is a property of on select. So under gallery, each of the component has a on select property. So this basically means that whenever somebody selects that, what needs to happen. So what I'm going to tell is I'm going to use a method called as collect, and this method is how you collect values into a collection. So when I say collection, if you see here, there is a property called collections, or there is a page called collections. This is where all of the pages, all of your apps collections gets displayed. So we'll collect here. Now the first parameter says what is the collection name. Currently there is no collection defined. What I'm going to say is, let's call this collection as tracked players. And what is the item that you want to populate in this collection? Okay, let's give this property, the first column is name. This name would be the players gallery dot selected item. In that selected item, pick up the display name property, and that's how you define a column. So in the collection, in this tracked players collection, there is a name column, and the name column is getting populated by whatever the user selects. Whichever list item the user selects from this gallery, the display name of that item is going to get resided in the name column. The second column that we are going to pick is let's say player ID. Okay, and this is essentially the unique ID of the player that we are targeting. Again, we'll say players gallery dot selected dot unique ID. Okay, and the third column, we also need the avatar image to be present, so we'll say avatar column will have a value of players gallery dot selected item dot avatar, and this concludes our collection creation of collections. Let's see it in action. Now, even before that, actually let's try and see how it all works out, and we'll go here. Let's say I want to track this, it's DSNY. I tap this and nothing happens on the screen, but I'm hopeful that one entry has gone into the collection. So let me close this, go back into file, look at the collections, and now as you can see, we have tracked players collection built. We have three properties, three columns here: name, its DSNY, player ID, and the avatar URL. Okay, awesome. So now what we are going to do is, for this gallery, we chose to go to the Rocket League stats website for bringing in all of the items that gets displayed in this list. Alright, for this particular gallery, we don't need to get into the RL or the stats website. Instead, let's target this gallery for the recent collection that we have made, because whoever we track here needs to gets displayed here. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna edit this or come into the gallery, or let's call this as tracked gallery. Tracked gallery, and again get into the items property, and here I'm gonna say that pick up all the items from tracked players. Okay, and the title would be the title text property would be this item dot name property, which is you are already seeing its DSNY displayed here. Let's populate the image as well, and the image would have a image property, and let's give this as this item dot avatar, and there you go. Okay, let's also have, instead of let's actually also see how we can delete items from the collection. So let's say if I have wrongly tracked this item, or maybe I just don't want to track this player anymore, how do I delete it from the collection? Let's get into the edit mode here of this tracked gallery. Let's create an icon of trash. I'll put it randomly as of now. I'm not going to worry too much about the positioning of this, and the width and height property should be 30 and 30, which is absolutely fine. The Y property, let's do it the proper way. Tracked gallery dot template height divide by 2 minus icon 1 dot height divide by 2. So that's the dead center, and the color, let's put it as white. And what happens when you select this delete icon or the trash icon? So I'm gonna go into the onSelect property, and I would say that remove, and this remove method is essentially going to help me remove any particular item from the collection. So remove from which collection? I want to remove it from tracked players collection. What is the item? This item. I want to remove this item from the collection. There is another property which is like absolutely optional, which says all or first. Now what this all means here is all of the instances of this item that are present in the tracked players collection will get removed. So what if, consider a scenario, if I press this icon or press this arrow mark multiple times, there are going to be multiple or duplicate entries getting into the tracked players collection, and you would see duplicate entries here in this list. If I want to remove all of them at once, I'm just gonna say all here, and this is now ready. Let's see it in action. I'll play it, click delete, and boom, there you go. The item is now gone. Let me select my user here. I'll track myself. Awesome, an entry gets displayed. I'll track Mahir, one of my teammates. I'll say track, and there you have it. I'll say another one of my teammates, CyberX96, track, and boom, there I have it. Let's say if I no longer wants to track Mahir, I just press the delete, he's gone. If I don't want to track myself, just press delete, it's gone. So with this, I think we have pretty much covered the entire content for this session. although the app doesn't look exactly the same as you see here, but still we are like 80% there, and there needs to be some more effort that needs to be applied in order to make get it to 100%. All right, so let's go ahead and summarize this session. I think we missed just one last thing here. Before even we get to the summary section, consider a scenario wherein this app is now ready and it needs to be published for other people to actually use. How do we do that? We'll get into the file, we'll save this app, and this is essentially going to save the app, and that's where it's going to give you an option to publish the same version. And if at all you feel that no, this version doesn't looks to be good for publishing, you can also see all of the other options or all of the other versions that are available for this app. Let's see what do we have in terms of all the versions currently. So as you can see, there are two versions currently. It says this version, this is published, and we did another save, and let's go ahead and publish this version. So I've gone ahead, and now this is the live version. Now the thing is, the app is now ready and it is published, but it isn't currently available with all of the other users in your organization. How do you share this app so that people can go ahead and use this app? You can do that by getting into the share screen here, and currently there is only one entry that's available, and you just search for the people who with whom you want to share this app here, or and then go ahead and change the permission from owner to, let's say, can use or can edit this application. And if you have like thousands of users in your organization and you don't want to pick and choose individuals in this screen, you also have an option to add everyone in your org to be allowed to use this application. So yeah, that's about it. Let's get into the summary. So first we went ahead and understood how the Power App Studio looks like, made ourselves familiar with the screen here, and then we went ahead and built a very simple responsive layout on one of the app ideas that we had. And one thing to note, that we didn't use any of the static values in terms of positioning or sizing of each of the components. So that's a very good thing, and this is actually one of the best practices which a lot of people don't follow, and then kind of later get into trouble. And then we went ahead, used one of the gallery controls, and viewed the data from external system. And this is actually the USP of PowerApp. It is capable of displaying data from multiple sources into a single canvas. We then went ahead, taken a look at all of the different connectors that are available for PowerApps. There's a huge list of predefined connectors, but we went ahead and created our custom connector since that wasn't available from the list of all the connectors. Um, Finally, once the app was ready, we have seen how do we publish this app and then make it available for other users in your organization. And I think we are still under 1 hour, and we have pretty much completed the entire app, a complete functioning app from scratch. So a big thank you to you guys for attending this session, and if you have any questions for me, just feel free to drop in the comments below this video, or you can always reach out to me on my website everythingcrm.in, and you can also drop me an email and I would be happy to help. Thank you so much again.